Hello, everybody, and welcome back to our reading of Matthew. It has been a minute. I have been busy. I have been very busy, and just really honestly had to let some things kind of go on pause for a while, and this was one of the things I had to get put on pause. But back now, things have finally started to cool down just a little bit for me, so we can delve back on into this. So yeah, we're going to be reading through a couple chapters today, or however many we get through, of Matthew. Really kind of been enjoying this, really, and the goal obviously is that we're going to try to delve just a little bit beyond the common reading, see if we can't get something just a little bit extra out of it. Hopefully, that's something that we can kind of get going more properly as we go through this. My goal is always to go just a little bit beyond the lateral reading, try to gain a little bit of spiritual insight as to what's being provided and what's being said. And Matthew, I think, is one of the Gospels that's just not commonly used for a study, so that's kind of what led me to pick it in the end. But yes, obviously we're going to go ahead and get everything up so you guys can follow along with me. As always, if you're with me live or if you're watching afterwards, please feel encouraged. Go ahead and leave your thoughts, any comments you have. Love to hear them, even if you think I'm a complete idiot and you think I'm totally way off base. Totally fine hearing that too. So, chapter 5 is where we start the Sermon on the Mount. Now, when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on a mountainside and sat down. His disciples came to him, and he began to teach. And I think whenever it says the disciples, it's not, I think in this context anyway, it's not necessarily just referring to the apostles, although they would be among them. Because at this point, Jesus still had quite a few followers. So when we're talking about disciples, I think more in this case, it's still the crowds, because he hadn't yet delivered the sermon at the feeding of the 5,000, which is where a lot of people kind of started to fall away. At this point, Jesus was still somebody who was kind of seen to be almost this ye old celebrity type status. The Beattitudes. This is one of the common behaviors we see a lot of people teach on whenever it comes to the matter of starting to learn how to live the Christian behavior, which isn't right. Really, that should come from learning to love like God first. But this is kind of a good example of the things you can see from people. So he said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted." And right away, we can see that the focus is on those who would be considered perhaps less fortunate or elsewise just placed out in some way by the common people of the world. And so, the people that are poor in spirit, already that's something that I think a lot of, modern day readings would just be like, whoa, what on earth, are you, that's a weird message to delve into. But when it says poor in spirit, it's not saying people that don't have faith or people that aren't connected to the spirit. When it's saying poor in spirit, it means your earthly spirit, yourself is brought low. Whenever the you is brought low, so it can be subservient to God. Because you are essentially a vessel. That's what the flesh is. And that vessel can contain you and your own ego and your self-aggrandizement, or it can be subservient to the spirit. And when you learn to make yourself low in spirit or poor in spirit, then God is made greater in you. And that's whenever your journey with him as a child actually is brought to its peak, is whenever you're in that state. So it sounds weird to say blessed are people who are poor in spirit, but when you actually understand what he's saying, it's something that makes total sense. So blessed are those who are low in spirit, if you want to use that terminology, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Again, just everything that the loving person seeks. If they are with God, they will receive it. Now, that's not the same thing as receiving an earthly blessing. That's something a lot of prosperity preachers make the mistake of. It's not saying, you're going to receive all these wonderful, earthly blessings. You will receive some. You will receive a total completeness of heart. You will receive an understanding. If you pursue it, you will receive, the fruits of the Spirit, or actually, you'll provide the fruits of the Spirit, and you will receive the gifts of the Spirit. But it's a mistake just to say that, oh, well, the Bible says that I'm going to be blessed, if I'm this being. So obviously I'm going to have, wealth and all this kind of stuff. Well, no, that's complete nonsense. Nowhere is this that put forth in the Bible. In fact, the Bible typically talks down all pursuits of earthly, grandeur, if we want to call it that. So blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. And mind you, again, this isn't just saying people who think that there is no, peacemaker. Man, that's a term that's difficult to really hit on in the English. But peacemaker doesn't mean somebody who has no fight in them. That we tend to take peacemaking to the extreme. But peacemakers are somebody who seeks to end quarreling, seeks to achieve peace between people, but most importantly within themselves. Because the spirit and the flesh are constantly at war with one another. You're never going to be able to stop that war. Is the same way you're never going to be able to bring an end to all quarrel between man. Anyone that without having some form of mind control or whatever, but without total authoritarian control, you're never going to be able to stop the war that takes place between men. But if you can seek to have a peace and an understanding between people as much as is possible, that's kind of what we're hitting on here. It's that pursuit of peace, if we want to call it that. So blessed are those who pursue peace, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness. So again, here we're hitting up on the difference that people often place whenever they go prosperity preaching. Well, how can you be prosperous but also be persecuted? It's something that doesn't go hand in hand. So you have to realize one is not synonymous with the other. But blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And I think that line, that verse, verse 10 there, is something that takes kind of a higher precedence, really, in our modern age. Because, it's one of those things, just the modern world loves to mock everything that is Christianity, everything that is a peace and an understanding and a desire for love, and the desire, most of all, to share Christ with those around us. And especially in first world countries, I hesitate to call it atheism because it's not really atheism, but the rampant dislike of God and of Christ and of the Spirit is something that is popular, which is, kind of absurdly hilarious in the literal meaning, to put it this way. But yeah, it's become popular to be flippant and dismissive about the idea of God. And it's one of the greatest mistakes people often make today, early on in their walk. Even, new Christians, that they'll have difficulty kind of trying to get into the Bible. And especially those who were raised in a church really typically have a greater issue with this. And I can understand it, because it's difficult to go back to what you think you understand and try to re-understand it. That's a very difficult thing to do. But it's very, very important to spend time in the Word, and it's very, very important to be plugged into a church. Now, is it possible to get connected to God without those things? Yes. Paul did not have a Bible. He had probably some of the teachings of the Old Testament, but he didn't have a Bible. He had his lived experiences and what he was taught by, with Jesus and everything, and what the other apostles and him, talked about. So is it possible? Yes. It's also absurdly difficult to connect to God without being in the Word and without attending a church. And, I don't know why you would set yourself up to try to squeeze the camel through the eye of the needle when you have a much easier path. Because even the easy path is absurdly difficult. And the reason why I encourage, especially new believers, to join a church isn't just for the growth of the church. Right? The church, in the way that we mean it when we say it, is just a building. Right? And as an organization, I don't really care. But for the purpose of its body, of its congregation, it's extremely important to have not only a place to come together and give worship, which is important, but also to be encouraged. Because you're going to need that, because the world is going to take every opportunity just to slam you down and beat you down. It loves to do that, and it's going to find plenty of excuses to do that, even without people in your life, but especially amongst, if you say have work with a lot of non-believers, they're going to almost relish in the chance just to try to beat you down and try to, attack you all day long. And even if you're sure in your faith, it's going to be something that wears on you. And I don't know anybody that can enter into battle like that endlessly without being some form of rejuvenation and being refreshed and handle that. You're going to go crazy. You being superhuman to be able to do that. So that's why I always encourage people, find a church, find something, even if it's, find a Discord group, if nothing else, find something that you can go to and be encouraged, and you can spend time in the Word, and that you can spend time, especially important is praying. It's one of those things, somehow our church has gotten lax on teaching the importance of prayer. And I don't just mean, thank you God for our food. Sure, great, wonderful, but not, what we're hitting on here. Sorry, Discord would make a noise. The importance isn't just, thank you God for this food. Sure, that's great. But if it's not something you're saying as an earnest, moment to God, you're essentially just, you're writing a blank check with your mouth that you can't cash. That's something you shouldn't do. You need to try earnestly to connect to God. Now, does that mean you're always going to receive, a very clear response? No. Does it mean your prayers are always going to be answered? No. Sometimes God does say no to what you're praying for because it's something that's not good for you, or it's something that's not going to work out in the long run, and we don't know that. But always you need to be praying, and you need to be trying to have an earnest connection with God. That's what he wants more than anything, is to do life with his creation. He wants it to be a synonymous journey. And so the Bible is essentially your field manual to connecting with God. That's one of the biggest importances of it. I know we kind of get off in the sidelines here, but it's me. We do that. But yeah, that's why it's so important to have that understanding in the Word. Now, eventually, you're going to hopefully step into that point where you have a connection to God. And that's going to be something that rejuvenates you. But it's always, always, always should be squared away with your Bible every single time. So like I said, I know we kind of got off on the side thing there, but I talk a lot. So down in about verse 11 here. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. We just talked about that at length. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your work in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. And basically, just it's important to understand that not only will you be attacked, but it's important to understand that what's really happening there, even if the people you're talking to don't realize it, is Satan is attempting to use an avenue of attack against you. That's the thing. People live under this delusion that you can be, I guess, in the middle, in a gray area between God and Satan. It doesn't work that way. Either you're God's child or you belong to the earth, which Satan has dominion over. There's no in between about this thing. And I think Matthew has one of the gospels that has the temptation, so we'll hit up on that in a while whenever we get there. But if I hesitate to say this just because it's a goofy pop culture reference, but that's the way my brain works. It's kind of like the Matrix, right? If you're not unplugged, you're one of them. Now, that's not to say that, the Matrix has a lot of religious symbology in it that you can relate to that. But the point being that Satan can use non-believers as an avenue of attack against you. And he loves to do that because it makes you feel like an outsider. And to a degree, you are. Your focus is no longer on the world in the way theirs is. And so you have to withstand that and ideally live as an example. Because that's one of the greatest forms of evangelism there is for people that understand you are a person and for them to realize that you have something they don't have. That's one of the greatest forms of evangelism I think there is. Now, on a personal level, there's other things you can do, but I'm talking just in the broad sense. One of the first things that should alert people to this idea of anything that is, a different style of life is that idea that you have this thing that they do not commonly have. Ideally. You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. And that's kind of an interesting verse, really, on its own, is because salt can't be unsalty. At least as I understand it, it's basically impossible to make salt not salty. But I think what he's talking about here essentially is a corrupted form of salt. Anything that is because salt, obviously, it can get stuff in it, and once something is in salt, you really can't get it out, and it can't be used at that point. At that point, it's going to be, just made essentially unimportant and unusable. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand. It gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. We kind of talked about that a little bit earlier with the idea of that being an example of the way you live and the way you have a completeness that they don't have. Ideally, that should be one of the greatest forms of peace and understanding you provide, is that you have this completeness that is not inherent. Because every person, if I could use words, is born broken in spirit. Their soul, rather, is born broken. And the reuniting with God is what makes that whole. And if people can actually understand that you have that healing, even if they're, the most stubborn, blasphemous atheist, and I shouldn't even say atheist again, agnostic, some part of them, hopefully, can see that and wonder, well, what do they have? What is it that makes them that way that I don't have? Again, I'm speaking a little bit in ideals here, but that's one of the forms of evangelism you can have just by the way you live and by the way you speak. You're constantly witnessing. And it's the same way lights work. Like light spills over. And this is one of the reasons why the Bible also warns so heavily against spending all your time around non-believers. Even if you are somebody who doesn't necessarily believe or doesn't believe strongly, if you spend your time around other believers, that overflowing of spirit will start to fall on you, and it will affect you. It will change the way you think. And ultimately, in that, whenever non-believers hang around with believers, their heart kind of comes to a crossroad, and they decide either they don't want to spend time with that person anymore, or that they want to spend time with that person because they want to understand. And that point of choice, I guess if you want to call it that, comes at several points in everyone's walk, whether you realize it or not. Oftentimes you don't. But what you put out into the world affects those around you. It does. You are constantly shining an energy. It's the same way with non-believers. They don't think they do, but they do affect the people around them. It's one of the reasons why when people that all think exactly the same get together, they form that kind of echo chamber, it's called. And it's because they're bleeding their energy onto each other and almost performing a kind of a feedback loop. Well, it's that way whenever you're a believer and you're around non-believers. They will attack you, but it's because you're shining this light that they don't understand on them. And it's upsetting because it's something they think is either a false thing, or else it's just something that is upsetting because why should you have this completeness and this light whenever they've been very comfortable in the darkness the entire time, or at least have convinced themselves that they are. And of course, all of that is something that's done to glorify God. It's not for the sake of the self. It's not for this a self-aggrandizement. It's certainly not for any holier than thou attitude that unfortunately some people do gain and just totally mistaken. But all of it is to glorify that God, through his creation, can take what was a miserable, broken being and do something wonderful, and then have this wonderful healing and this wonderful understanding and this wonderful light. So do not think I come to abolish the law or the prophets. Mind you, when he's talking about the law, he's speaking of the Mosaic law, the law that was set down. I can't even remember how many laws they had at this point. I want to say it was like 613, some insane number. They had this huge list of laws, most of which were added afterwards. The original Mosaic law, I don't remember how many laws there were, but you have to understand the Mosaic law was set down for a few reasons. One, because most other countries didn't have a law like that. Most countries did not. In fact, I don't think any other country did, from what I understand. I'm not a historian to that degree, but my understanding is really almost no other country had a law like that at this point in time, that was set up so heavily focused to make sure that people, took care of each other and things were handled civilly. A lot of it was still very, very rough and weird and very, pagan behavior. And that's one of the reasons why Israel was so strange comparatively when it was set up. It's like, oh, you guys have all these laws and you have this God that loves you and our God doesn't talk like that. And so that's why they were seen as very odd and very strange. And unfortunately, the Pharisees then took that as to mean that the Jews were, unique in holding this this loving God as opposed to the people that were supposed to bring it into the world. But Jesus gets into that later. But yeah, so Jesus wanted to make it clear here because a lot of people, even today, they make that mistake. They say that Jesus came and abolished the old law. Well, Jesus did not abolish the law. He fulfilled it. Because the purpose of the old law was that if you were going to be a holy being, if you were going to achieve holiness by your own merits, these are the steps you would have to follow. And no one was capable of living that out. I mean, they had to go and make these grand sacrifices every year to try to atone for their multitude of sins. And they had to sacrifice throughout the year. They had to give sacrifices because they were constantly screwing up, and even that didn't cover it. And so the purpose of the Mosaic Law, aside from just a country creating people that couldn't kill each other, but ultimately, the purpose of the old law was that there is no way anyone was going to be able to fulfill that by their own merit. Something had to fill that law. Something had to fulfill that covenant, and that was Jesus. That's why he says he comes to fulfill the law. He's not abolishing it. He's not destroying it. He is filling it. For truly I tell you. Oh, also, this is something that's, sorry, forgive me, dry mouth. Something that's important to understand. Every time Jesus says, truly I tell you, or the different translations say verily, verily, or truly, truly. But basically, anytime he's opening a sentence like that, he's testifying on his own behalf, which in this point in time is a big, big no-no. You cannot do that. The Jewish tradition was you had to have two witnesses with you for anything you testified about, and that was done to try to keep people from lying. And if you didn't have those two witnesses to testify with you, you basically couldn't say, well, I saw this, I saw that. You had to have people with you that could confirm. Well, Jesus is able to testify not only because he's the Son of God, but also because he is with the Father and the Holy Spirit. They are also with him. So he is actually, he constantly, it is the Trinity of beings. Which again, yes, Trinity doesn't appear anywhere in the Bible, but the concept is all over it. And the entire time Jesus was on earth, the Spirit was with him and the Father was watching him until the final seconds of the cross. But point being that he's testifying on his own behalf here, which is one of the 100 reasons that the Pharisees were just losing their minds about this stuff, because he was just coming in and totally abolishing what was the standard practice at this time. And that's partially why he's pointing out here, he's like, I'm not coming to abolish your law. I'm coming to fulfill it. Because the Pharisees at this point are screaming, heretic, heretic. You're, breaking all the laws that were set down by Moses and everything that, our covenant that was set by Father Abraham and all this kind of stuff. And then Jesus is like, dude, you guys totally don't get it. You're completely off base. Because the Jewish culture at this point had completely stooped in tradition as religion in place of any sort of connection to God. So, for truly I tell you, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, not the least stroke of the pen, will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. But what did Jesus just say? He said he's coming to fulfill the law. So he's not saying that, and the law still isn't disappeared, but it's fulfilled. And I think when he says everything is accomplished, I think he's talking in the grander sense of Revelation and the rebuilding of the earth and the rising of the dead. Yeah, I mean, the Christian dead, the second coming. Let's call it that. So I'm more clear. But yeah, because Jesus is very clear. I'm not coming to abolish the law. Therefore, anyone who sets aside one of the least of these commands and teaches others accordingly will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever practices and teaches these commands will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. Now, it's important to understand that even to be called least in the kingdom of heaven means you're still in the kingdom of heaven. Even if all you did in your period of life was give your life to God, and then you died, you didn't have time to actually accomplish any works, you're still in. Your soul is still sealed in the book of life, and that's wonderful. But there is a greater calling beyond that. The salvation is not your salvation is the beginning of your journey, not the end. And that's something not a lot of churches teach on, and that's one of the things that I try to teach on whenever I have the opportunity to speak and preach, is that that's not the end of your journey. It's just the beginning. There's so much more beyond that. And maybe that's a lesson we'll get into sometime on one of these, but not today. That's something that'll leave us too far off in the weeds. But yeah, so to practice and teach the commands is something that will leave you being called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, and mind you, there's a reason that he brings them up, because right now they're seen as the ultimate teachers, right? They're the ones that have all the knowledge. And this is something I say even against like the lecturers of today. You can't have a purely pragmatic knowledge of the Bible. It's not bad to have that knowledge. That knowledge can actually be very, very helpful. But unless that's accompanied by a spiritual connection and discernment, all you are is a teacher of the law. And ultimately, you're not going to benefit yourself or anyone else that you're trying to teach. So, for I tell you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven. And again, we just covered how it's impossible to be holy by your own account, right? We talked about how you can't do that. That's why Jesus had to be the sacrifice for mankind. That's why he is the only door by which one can enter heaven. So down to verse 21, this is where Jesus talks about murder. And mind you, this is still all the Sermon on the Mount. This is still all under that moment of teaching. You have heard it said to the people long ago, you shall not murder. Commandment number 6, I believe. And anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. But I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. Again, anyone who says to a brother or sister, Raka, okay, so this was an Aramaic word, but yeah, a term of contempt, essentially, something that's a vile spit, if you want to call it that, is answerable to the court. And anyone who says, you fool, will be in the fire or in danger of the fire of hell. Now, mind you, this isn't just to say that if you're frustrated, you're going to burn. Again, if you are truly a Christian, if you have truly given your life to God, if you're trying to turn away from sin, you are signed and sealed in the book of heaven. You cannot lose your salvation. But it's a sin to fall into this contempt for your brothers and sisters. It's easy to do. It's human to do. It's very fleshly to do. So I'm not saying that, because you stumbled, now you've screwed up. No, but it's something you need to realize is a sin, and it's something that you need to work at whenever you can, repenting of. One of the Psalms, I believe it is, has Daniel going on at length about search the secret places of my heart, reveal those dark places of my heart. This is one of those things I would put in that category, is contempt for others. It's a very easy thing to have. I've caught myself in it a number of times. So don't think that because I've been angry with other people, because I've felt contempt for other people, now I'm not a Christian anymore. No, but you need to try not to let that sit in your heart. Now, that's not the same thing as holding a disagreement or thinking that a person is being foolish, but to actually hold hatred or contempt for another person. That's something you can't do. Therefore, if you are offering your gift at the altar, and there, remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. First go and be reconciled to them. Then come and offer your gift. Now, this is also something that's kind of important just to understand about the current age and the current day. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to forgive you. In this point in time, whenever Jesus was speaking, maybe that was more commonplace. I honestly don't know enough of the history to know what the behavior was like. But you're not responsible for their reaction. You're responsible for what you do. You're responsible for your piece of it. And that's the focus here, is not, make sure you go and receive their acceptance. But make sure you go and you reconcile that anger or that hatred in your heart. Because if you try to offer it with that in you, that's a sin you're carrying, and you cannot come to God with sin. Settle matters quickly with your adversary, who is taking you to court. Do it while you are still together on the way, or your adversary may hand you over to the judge, and the judge may hand you over to the officer, and you will be thrown into prison. Truly, I tell you, you will not get out until you have paid the last penny. Adultery. You have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. Again, one of the commandments. But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. I'll just leave it at the pornography industry. Any of it. I don't care what it is. Any form of it, it's sin. That's something that shouldn't even be a matter of discussion. Any form of porn, it's a sin. I'm not going to go any two ways about that. I'm not going to dress that up. There's no, sometimes no. It's sinful. I understand it's difficult. I'm not going to talk that down at all. It's extremely difficult, especially typically for men. But it is a sin. And you do need to repent of it. You need to do everything you can not to fall to it. And yes, you're going to struggle. Yes, it's hard. But there is a total difference between saying, hey, I'm struggling in the flesh, but I'm trying to stop. I'm trying to get away from it, and I need help. Versus, everyone does it, so it's okay. Because that's the predominant attitude is, it's okay. It's not a big deal. It's sin. If your right eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out and throw it away, for it is better you lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to go into hell. Obviously here, I don't believe this is him being literal and saying you should be chopping off body parts. But if something is causing you difficulty, if something is consistently causing you to fall, even if it in and of itself is not a sin, cut it out. One example, this is just, say you have a group of friends and you guys share a drink together. Is that sinful? No. That's a moment of, as long as you don't go into drunkenness, I should clarify. But to just have a drink with friends, that is not sinful. That's something that's a moment of communion and merriment, and it's wonderful. But if once you have those, a drink or two or whatever, you start loosening up your morals and you start falling into that area, that stuff, then yeah, you absolutely need to have a serious talk and you need to say, hey, I can't, that's something that's going to cause issues for me. Former alcoholics also have that thing. They have to say, hey, I get you guys are going to do that, but respectfully, I can't join that. That's a problem for me. Or people that have, violent triggers, or issues in their past or whatever, they say that's not something I'm able to do. And, if you're saying that lovingly, your brothers and sisters can accept that, and they'll hopefully make allowances for you so that you're not prone to that temptation. But yeah, there's also a way to bring that about. it's a very different statement to say I'm struggling in the flesh and Satan has a good grip on me versus saying I was you know giving in to porn last night. There's a way to be tactful about the way you say it, which isn't to lessen it, but it's so that you're not putting images in people's head. Um, so I guess just be aware of that. Don't feel you have to be graphic and be explicit, but find somebody that you can trust, and just say, hey man, I need you to pray with me. Hopefully it's somebody that you can trust enough to, that they'll text you in the week and be like, hey man, just been praying for you, been thinking about you, how you've been doing, and that you can be honest with them in response. That's something that's very, very valuable. Again, especially in the circumstance of porn. That's one of the greatest things I think that can actually help people is having a person you have to be accountable to. I used to be part of a men's group, and that was one of the questions every week we would ask each other. And it was a pretty embarrassing thing to have to go there and go, I've been having a rough week, guys. And so, as goofy as it sounds, that is one of the things that kind of started to pop in the back of your mind anytime that little devil popped up on your shoulder and would say, hey, we could look at this. And I know I would hit points where he would try to do that, and I'd have to think to myself, yeah, but then I have to go to the guys on Tuesday and say I did that thing. So, as goofy as it sounds, there is a reason for things like accountability. It has been said, anyone who divorces his wife must give her a certificate of divorce. But I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife except for sexual immorality makes her the victim of adultery. And anyone who marries a divorced woman commits adultery. Now, mind you, I think this is one of those things that kind of goes hand in hand. And frankly, even in the case of divorce, a lot of people take the attitude of I'm trying to think how to delve into this. So, okay, if you're married, right, and your spouse, whether they claim to be or not when you marry them, is not living a Christian life, that does not abolish your responsibility to them. That's one of the reasons why marriage has to be taken so seriously. And I would say, honestly, it has to come down to a discernment moment as to, even if they say they want nothing to do with you, even if they leave you, divorce you, or they have affairs, as to what your responsibility is to them at that point. But basically, one of the biggest things here to take away is just that marriage cannot be something just done of convenience. It is something that is vitally important, and you're to try to fight for it with everything that's possible. And especially even today, marriage is one of those things. Oh, well, it's not going well, we'll just get a divorce. That's ridiculous. You can't do that. Now, if your spouse basically wants a divorce, there's really not much you can do about that. But to let anything just become an excuse to go and say, oh, well, I want to divorce you. No. Whenever you made a pledge to this person, it's something that has to be total. It's one of the reasons why marriage is so misfocused in our society, because marriage somehow has become a selfish thing. What are you bringing to the table? Why, what are you doing for me? Whenever marriage should be focused on charitable acts. Now, that's something that's supposed to go both ways. Your husband should be charitable to you as your wife should be charitable to you. I said that weird. The husband should be charitable to the wife as the wife is charitable to the husband. But yeah, the divorce is one of those things it's super, super tricky. And I actually gave a small sermon on causes of divorce and the best ways to avoid it. But the short version of it is the best way to avoid. My gosh, if I could use words, that'd be great. It's been too long since I talked this long. The best way to avoid divorce is to have both parties pray together daily. That is the number one thing that's going to drop your rate of divorce. Now, it's not going to say it doesn't happen between couples who pray together daily, but it drops way, 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 way low. I think it's something like 0.006% of couples who pray together daily get divorced. And that's because their focus is on God. And when two people come together with God first, even over your spouse, when they come together with God first, it binds them way more than all the attitudes of the earthly thing. But again, obviously, if you're at the point where your partner's committing adultery, they're clearly not coming before God, because you can't do that and be living an adulterous lifestyle. So oaths. Again, you have heard it. Again, you have heard that it was said to people long ago, "Do not break your oath, but fulfill to the Lord the vows you have made." Excuse me. But fulfill to the Lord the vows you have made. But I tell you, do not swear an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is God's throne, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. And do not swear by your head, for you cannot even make one hair black or white. All you simply need to say is yes or no. Anything beyond this comes from the evil one. And this is something that, even today, we make this mistake. We try to emphasize our truthfulness, and it's because it's so common to speak lies. But Jesus is basically saying here, don't swear an oath that you're not going to be able to keep. And don't blaspheme, don't make blasphemous anything by your oath by swearing by it. You don't have any control over that. Instead, let your word be what it is. Be reliable enough that if you say yes, people know it's a yes. Or at the very least, that you and God know it's a yes. And then if you say no, it's a no. Don't try to emphasize that the sudden bout of truthfulness, because if you're already, if your word carries so little weight that you have to make this aggrandizing swear that you're not lying, what does it matter what you swear by? So verse 38 here. You have heard that it was said, eye for eye and tooth for tooth. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. Now, mind you, he doesn't mean don't resist temptation. He means don't essentially attack evil people. For if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. If anyone wants to sue you, take your shirt, hand over your coat as well. If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2 miles. Give to the one who asks you, and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. Now, this isn't saying be a doormat. That's not what this is. That's a total different thing. It's saying that whenever somebody is trying to, I guess, push you, take from you, do something in that realm, don't fret about, that stuff. Don't say, oh, you're taking from me. It's all earthly stuff that they're focused on. Let it go. That's not saying you can't, try to do what's right. That's not saying you can't say, well, that's ridiculous or but don't let that become what you're focused on and what sits in your heart. That's all just earthly gains. And, if the thing that is ultimately drawing you away from God is, oh man, this person, did X, Y, Z, and that's what's holding in your heart. That's a place where God should be. That's foolishness to let that be what poisons you. So it's not saying that you can't stand up for yourself, but don't let it just poison you. Don't let that, don't get so caught up in the fight that you completely become devoted to that. You have heard it said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. This was also something that was, as I understand it, a unique aspect of Christianity. And one of the things that was so out of this world for a lot of the people that were listening to this. Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Now, again, that's not saying don't stand up for yourself. It's not saying don't stand up for what's right. Don't stand against what's wrong. But don't let yourself grow to hate them. Pray for them, that you may be children of your Father in heaven, because this is something that reflects God's love for them. You should be a reflection of his love as much as you are capable of being, and then some. If you're hating your enemy, and that's what you're putting out, what benefit is that? You're not growing. You're sitting in this hate-filled area, and you're certainly not going to, reflect any love onto them. So even if you're going to reproach them, do it with love. Even if you're going to argue with them, do it in love. Don't just come up with your chest, puffed out in this big, angry, hate-filled moment. You're not going to do them any good, and it's certainly not going to do you any good. He causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain down on the righteous and the unrighteous. For if you love those who love you, some translations say if you love only those who love you, what reward will you get? Are not even the tax collectors doing that? And if you greet only your own people, what are you doing more than others? Do not even the pagans do that? Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. And again, obviously, we will not achieve perfection, but that's the goal. The goal is to love people as God loves them. Now, yes, you still have flesh, you're still human, and so you're going to fall short. You're going to screw that up. That's just the permanent reality of it, right? We're never going to achieve that goal ultimately. But that's what we should be striving for, is that love, that understanding. And we need to be repenting of darkness and hatred, even though it's something that tends to sit upon us so heavily, rather. But I think that is going to do it for today. So thank you guys for joining me. Hope you got something out of it. Hope you enjoyed it. And I will see you guys next time.